Happy birthday Web Science from all of us at International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, India. I am Chaitali, a PhD student at Web Science Lab at IIIT. On this occasion, let's find out views of some of our professors and researchers on web science. Please meet our director, Professor Sadagopan. Sir, would you like to share your views on how web has impacted India?
Very interesting question. Many of you probably do not know that web and wireless came to India at the same time, August 1995. At that time, for a country of billion people, we had just 46 million customer connections. Today, it is over 1 billion. So in a sense, access to the web has been primarily through wireless in India. That is something special. The focus of both the wireless and the web has been on the common man in India, not necessarily by great planning, maybe by default. Let me give a couple of examples. One, WhatsApp. There are about 6 million small and medium enterprises in India, and you will be surprised the entire small and medium enterprise of 10 to 40, 50 people runs on WhatsApp. Balance sheets, purchase orders, invoices, bills of lading, and payment details are all shared by everybody on the WhatsApp, something unique to India. Second, matrimonial services. Services like distribution of caste certificate, land certificate, distribution of examination results involving millions of students and zillions of time, such a disease almost in India. All these things happen thanks to the web. Interestingly, this has also led to unusual business models. You might have seen in India people using the term missed call. What it means is simple. You call someone and hang up before the person picks up, and leaving a trail that there was a missed call. Using this, people have built services like banking. You do a missed call and get your account balance. Today, across multiple countries, this has become a billion-dollar business. Once again, web for the common man.
So would you like to talk about what is the future of digital empowerment in India?
We have come a long way, but there is still miles to go. While we may have a billion connections, the number of people it touches might still be only 600 million, because many of them have multiple connections. What it means for the remaining, how do you empower every Indian? 3 or 4 things have to happen. First and foremost, things have to become more affordable. Tariff has become quite cheap, but data is not that cheap in India. One would like the data costs to fall further down. Second, we also would need better connection speed. It is one thing to say the networks, but if you really want to be able to kind of download without really having to do what is called eternal wait, so you need better speeds. So affordability, better speeds, and probably the most important thing, we need local content. Local in the sense of being contextually local, locally relevant, things which are unique to India, which are special to India, which are needed by a large number of Indians, and in local languages. India is also an unusual country where a few dozens of languages are spoken, and most people speak multiple languages. In addition, we also have a large number of dialects. The same language has a multiple dialects. So it is important that the content be available in both the local language and the local dialect. And we do expect the next 10 years, web to be consumed more and more through speech and voice. You no longer will type, but you will talk to Google Assistant or Siri. But I would like someone in Bangalore to be able to speak in Kannada and not necessarily in English. And in order to make that happen, we need a whole range of things on the Indian language processing, and that should be again available. And the content available in local languages, local content will be the deal breaker. I do expect the next 10 years that to happen, and that would be the true empowerment of an average Indian.
I have been thinking about the web for a long time now, starting with as an undergrad in the early 1990s, just about the time the web started up. I'd been very interested in how the World Wide Web, the internet and the World Wide Web in particular, is changing the way we live. Not so much in terms of the technology behind it, but the impact that it is having on the way we live. And I'm very well convinced now that there is the web is deeply impactful. We have never had something like the web ever in the human history. Never in recorded human history we've had a time when two people in two different corners of the world can have a routine conversation sitting in their homes on a daily basis. Right? So this has in turn led to a lot of fundamental changes in the way we do business, in the way we look at education, in the way we organize our societies, in the way we govern, and so on. Right? A classic characteristic of societies before the web was the formation of entrenched clusters in different forms. So whether it be in the form of tribes or villages, with the industrial age, it became a little more organized and impersonal in the form of the emergence of cities and metropolitan centers, but still the size mattered at any point in time. The size of the city was directly proportional to its to the kind amount of knowledge that was there, the amount of interactions you could have, and so on. The web is now providing a serious challenge to such assumptions that by which we have been thinking about the world in the until now, right? So we are likely to see a lot of changes, and in some sense I see the 21st century as being characterized by the emergence of the web. So if I were to say a 21st century thought or a 21st century paradigm versus a 20th century paradigm, it means a very specific thing. It means after the web versus before the web. And it remains to be seen how we change or how the world changes over time, given the fact that the web is becoming an important element of our daily lives across the world.
So what do you think are the challenges ahead?
There are lots of challenges at different levels regarding the web itself. So we could, we could start from, say, the technological challenges. I'm speaking from, my views would be biased from challenges faced in India and emerging economy like India, right? And which did not enjoy the kind of industrial benefits that that characterized Western Europe or the US in the 20th century, right? So we still have a lot of places in India which do not have adequate power supply or adequate literacy, and the way we do business and the way we go about our daily lives are also very different, in the sense that we are not very comfortable with using technology. So we'd rather speak to another person. How do we orchestrate this kind of dynamics, right from the level of technology to the level of worldviews to the level of system dynamics like policies or education, culture, and so on. Now there are lots of challenges in each and every granularity level, right? So I think there's a lot of work for all of us to do, regardless of where we are coming from, whether we are coming from an engineering and technology background or whether we are coming from a psychology background or a social science background. I think there's a lot of work for each of us to do in web science. In 2006, incidentally in the same year when the Web Science Trust also formally started, I published this book called The Power Law of Information. And you see the subtitle is called Life in a Connected World, to put down my thoughts on how the web is affecting the way we think, and how, for example, we can think of this effect in the small and in the large. So the availability of the internet and the World Wide Web is affecting the way we think as individuals, that is in the small, and in the large it is affecting the way we think about businesses, we think about governance, we think about culture. So the larger, the conventional paradigms that govern these things are also fundamentally changing. So this has been my motivation towards starting this work. I started Web Science Lab formally around 2007 or so, a year after this book. And we had, one of the first things we did was to coin this term called socio-cognitive space to describe the web. So a socio-cognitive space, we define it as a logical space where humans are not users but participants. The web uses us as much as we use the web. So that means there is an affect property from the web onto humans, and as well as the other way around. And we have a notion of identity. Humans have an online identity versus an offline identity and so on, and they project their identity onto this. So that was the way we have been approaching the web for a long time, and our primary research focus was what we called a social cognition. So how are worldviews of the collective, right, changing because of the web? What is it that we used to believe, and how are these beliefs changing, and in turn what kind of changes are they bringing to society? For the past few months we have focused our research interests into something more specific, and we now call our research interest as to be in the area of digital empowerment. So how do we actually use the web towards empowerment? We broadly divide this empowerment question also into two parts, what we call in the small and in the large. We are more interested in the small questions, that is, how is the web affecting individuals, right? How is the web affecting the way we think, our access to information, right? Our access to other individuals who think like us and so on, right? And so we've been interested in the formation of communities, questions regarding the utility of knowledge, right? How do we characterize the utility of something? Questions regarding identity, right? How does the notion of an individual identity get formed, right? And questions regarding persuasion and insight, collective insight.
Hello, we are trying to understand how social cognition is affecting or is empowering the society. In this regard, we are trying to conceptualize what is called as a marketplace of opinion. Before trying to understand what is this, let us try to look at a few examples. In this example, there are few reports about Donald Trump and how he is using the social media for his campaign for the US presidential elections. Here we can see that Trump is using the social media as a weapon for his campaign, and most of the content that is being generated over Facebook or Twitter is about Trump, and he is making use of this aspect of the web. Let us look at one more example of Amir Khan, a Bollywood hero who is usually known as a perfectionist, and he made a comment last year saying on the intolerance debate, which was already a controversial topic going on in the country, and he said that his wife wants to leave the country because of the intolerance, and this got a lot of traction and a lot of opposition in the social media, and this made people to uninstall Snapdeal from their mobile phones because Amir Khan was the brand ambassador of Snapdeal, and within 3 months Snapdeal ended its contract with Amir Khan. Let us look at one more example of Sushma Swaraj, who is the current Minister of External Affairs of India, the way she is using the social media, she is trying to address every individual, trying to reply, and not only reply but then taking some action so that the issues are addressed. This has made her today one of the most followed women leaders, not only in India but the world. So in all these examples, if we can see, web is playing a vital role, and it is providing a platform where people can exchange opinions, and people's perspective are changing rapidly in a day-to-day life. People are investing their opinions on this platform, and they are getting some returns. Some of them are getting positive returns, some of them are getting negative returns, but everybody wants their investments to grow, and they put in their efforts so that their investment will grow. So what is an opinion? Opinion is a view of an individual which is partly subjective and partly objective. When an individual puts forth his opinion, he bundles it with an abstraction and an expression. For example, consider this diagram where two people are conversing, and one person is saying that this is a black cat and the other person is saying no, this is a dog. So when the first person is saying, he is saying it in a normal way without any noticeable expression, but when the second person is replying, he is angry and he is putting forth his idea along with his expression. So how are these opinions getting changed over the web? Opinions are getting engineered all the time. People are priming the opinions in such a way that they get a certain response. Some of them are intentional, some of them are unintentional. In the Amir Khan, he did not intend it to create such a large disruption in his life. Sometimes the expressions are caught first, and then slowly the idea gets in. For example, in the Amir Khan case, before getting the idea what he is saying, the expression what he made was caught first, and it created a lot of disruption. In other cases, users get the abstraction first and then slowly get the expression. In our lab, we are trying to understand what is this marketplace, what are the characteristics of this marketplace, and we are trying to see if there are any patterns. We are trying to identify if there are any patterns in the investment, how users are doing their investments, and if there exists any pattern in how they want their investments to grow. Thank you.
Hi, let's understand the concept of social utility. Utility is a characteristic property of the subject who's interested in the object in a given context. Now, if we consider the weather data, the farmer is interested in the weather report to make decision about what crops to grow, how to handle situations like tsunami or earthquake, and the traveler would be interested in the weather data to make decisions about the mode of transport. The properties that we study with respect to utility is payoff and credibility. Credibility makes any object usable or not. Web is a platform for people to exchange data. Open-ended data is a data which is available freely to the user, but only legitimate users should be able to access this private information. Can we build a system that can model trust in such a distributed environment? Web has a principle of data being distributed and decentralized. How can we manage trust of the data, that is the source of the data, as well as people who are going to access the data? How can we manage such a system is a question that we are trying to address in our lab. If we consider the example of a medical information system, say a person X has met with an accident. A doctor would be interested in the history of the person to provide better medical care. The media person would be interested in the impact that the accident has taken on the person. And the government employee would be interested in the address or the family members to provide some compensation. So the object that is of interest is the medical information of the person X, but there are various stakeholders who are interested in certain part of information, and there should be also provided only that part of information and nothing else. Now, how do we manage the capability of a person in a distributed environment? So the capability is of that of a government employee, of that of a doctor, of that of a media person. So we're trying to address questions like, can we have a web standard like digital signature that can identify a user's capabilities, whether he's playing a role of a government employee or he's playing a role of a teacher, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Please meet Professor S Rajagopalan. Sir, would you like to share your views on how web has impacted our society?
I started using web about 30 years ago. In IIT Kanpur, we first built a gopher to provide information about IIT Kanpur to the outside world. So in the 3 decades of the web use which I have witnessed in this country,
One way it has impacted is that people are able to access all kinds of information, fact, fiction, opinion, tips, anything they want over any Indian language using internet. Another thing what has happened is that increasingly web is consumed by mobile devices rather than stationary devices. Through mobile phones, and India is one country where mobile phone usage is one of the highest in the world. And when people consume web on the mobile phone, as most of us do now, that has its own restrictions because of the footprint. And what you can consume on a mobile footprint is much less than what you can consume on a regular laptop or a desktop. So in that sense, there are some, the nature of consumption has changed. It has homogenized the world completely, in the sense that what happens in Manila or Marrakesh is also as important to me as it happens in Bangalore or Mysuru. The importance to the geographical proximity as well as importance to the local communities have been undervalued because of the homogenizing nature of the World Wide Web. And that has impact on reducing the diversity of cultures, diversity of opinions, etc. in the world. Of course, the internet can also be used to promote diversities, to promote local cultures, and one can create a hyper-local web. But those things are much more difficult because of the internet companies like Google, Facebook, etc. have such a solid presence in the World Wide Web that they tend to determine that what we consume. In one of the projects which we are currently doing, we are trying to mine the web to find out what people in Bangalore have complained about or suggested about the local transport, and then use some kind of algorithm to extract preferences in local transport to see whether planning for local transport can become more participatory in nature, a virtual participation platform we could create within the web. So web, and in my specialized area of geographical information system, the web delivered maps are now more easily accessible to a large number of people on their mobile phones, on their desktops and iPads. And it has made location-based decision making to be more participatory in nature. So these are the kinds of things I keep doing in the web.
The concept of empowerment is absolute and relative, and I say it's relative because power provides the ability to influence action, and one's own action and others' action. So I am more powerful when I am able to have a greater control on my own action, and I am able to influence a large number of people and individuals in my network in terms of the kind of actions they should be making. So if in my network, or if in a network there are two kind of individuals, and one of them is consuming content from the web which is kind of leading to a certain level of improvement in capabilities, and the other is not, then relatively the person who is consuming from the web is more empowered because of the web than the person who is not. And the way this translates into a reality in, say, societies like the Indian societies is most of the marginal and, say, I'll not say underdeveloped, but those who need development interventions more, they are not consumers of the web. And those who probably need or those who don't need development interventions, those who don't need support from the state as much as the others, they are consuming from the web, they are producing for the web. Now in this sense, within the society, the kind of production consumption pattern that the current system of web is promoting is leading to, in many cases, a greater marginalization of those who are already marginalized in the society. A rural woman agricultural worker, for example, currently may not see a lot of value, or is completely outside the consumption network that the current system of web promotes. She is definitely not producing for the web, but the contractor for whom she works is consuming content from the web, which is making that contractor more powerful. And in terms of the relative power that the contractor can wield over this woman, because of consuming from the web, increases. And therefore, while the web directly does not disempower this woman, because it is affecting the relative power distance between these two individuals, the rural woman worker, who is more in need of development interventions and support from the state and other agencies, development agencies, finds herself at a relatively disadvantaged position because of the way the current consumption patterns in the web exist. And the current consumption patterns exist because of various issues, and this has been discussed quite a lot in literature. Web is primarily English. Even when there is content that exists in, say, local languages, the content would kind of favor more who are already networked into dominant positions within existing societies. So while we have content in, say, Hindi in India, we will not have content in a tribal language. We will not have content in a dialect of Hindi, which most of the poor people in a rural area would speak. So even there, in terms of content that's created in local languages or in Indian languages, there is a power relationship that exists. We will have to relook at the way content is produced on the web. How can this person start contributing to creating content for the web? How can she become a producer for the web? And unless we start thinking about in those terms, unless we start democratizing production on the for the web, the consumption patterns would remain the way they are right now. And in terms of empowerment, we may not be able to achieve empowerment of certain sections who we want to be empowered more than those who actually are getting empowered because of the way production is happening on the web. Some of my recent, say, empirical studies have been around public health and how the grassroots and the frontline service delivery units, such as the health sub-center or the primary health center, how do they consume and how do they produce information and communication technologies. And again, there what I have found is that in terms of the production and consumption, most of what we are designing as ICTs in governance and ICTs in development is reflective of existing power relations, does not factor in changes that should happen to bring about better productivities, to bring about better working conditions for those who are actually providing that service. It's more to empower people or empower officials who are higher up in the hierarchy, and that empowerment is in terms of controlling those who provide the service at the grassroots. This seems to be built on a fundamental principle of distrust amongst individuals, and it seems to be kind of accentuating the power distance that currently exists. And I see in those contexts, the way we design technologies, including the web and the content over the web, if we are able to democratize that, if we are able to bring in these marginal, say, the marginal groups in our society, the marginal government officials, see, the officials who actually provide the service, I would say, are marginal in terms of the overall government hierarchy. if we are able to get them to produce more, if we are able to, and only when we get them to produce more in terms of co-creation of technology, in terms of producing for the web, will we be able to make them consume more. And only when they consume more will they find some semblance of empowerment in terms of whatever they are doing.